to Healthy Living with me, Nomaqhawe and Ndlovu. Today we're at St. John's with Butonyoni, a first aid instructor. We're going to discuss first aid and he's going to teach us some first aid procedures. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you give us a brief history of St. John's in Ndlovu?
Right, I'll take it from the top. St. John Ambulance Association, the worldwide organization, it started in 1866. So it's one of the oldest humanitarian organizations. Right, of course, John is named after John the Baptist. It was like what we call a patron nowadays.
Okay.
Then here in Bulawayo, it started right around 1920 at the railway service station. That is where the first center was.
Okay, and what exactly do you do here?
Like here at St. John Bulawayo, we offer first aid courses, of which we have two types: basic first aid for 2 days, and we have advanced first aid or lifesaver international first aid course.
Okay.
That is for 5 days, Monday to Friday, as well as we offer home-based care courses, and we also have 2 types of those. Like we have the commercial home-based care course, the one that's relevant for nurse aides. Right. Then we have what we call CHS, child in our households, whereby St. John with other organizations like Pentecost and the Juanita, we sponsor these children and teach them or impact skills, necessary skills to them. Because why we thought so, we realized due to the HIV epidemic, some of the people will be having sick parents at home, or maybe one parent is sick, so we impart the skills to them so that they can assist their parents and being able to assist their parents in a safe environment. Because as a result, some children are getting infected. So those ones, they don't pay. So if you're 24 years and below, and you have a death certificate and your birth certificate, you bring those, you register, then you come and then.
Okay.
Everything will be provided. Right, as well as we have ambulances. Of course, with ambulances, we have commercial ambulance, that is a critical care ambulance. And we also have the brigade ambulance for duties like if there are matches or sporting events.
Okay. So, briefly, can you tell us what exactly is first aid?
Right. First aid, it is the initial means, the first help or assistance that is given to a casualty before medical help arrives using available materials. Therefore, as a first aider, someone who's able or capable of improvising, because it will not always be possible to have your first aid kit readily available at all times.
Okay. So what's the role of a first aider? The role of a first aider.
The role of a first aider. Right. The role of a first aider is to make sure that you are there when it happens.
Okay.
And assist the person. I think as you are aware, in terms of the health sector, the golden hour, any treatment or any medical attention the person gets within an hour is very critical, and it will greatly increase the chances of the casualty survival. Therefore, since as a first aider, you be the first person at the scene, you are a very, very vital and important person in the health sector.
Okay, and who do you look at to teach? You mentioned child-headed families. Who else in society do you feel like you prioritize to teach to be first aiders?
Right. Basically, in my opinion, I would think first aid must be for everyone. Even our courses are tailor-made for everyone.
Okay.
They are suitable for everyone.
Okay.
Even if you have problems with English, we can assist you, because we believe first aid everyone must know it. Or you realize that everyone has done first aid in one form or the other, or is capable of doing first aid. But now, very few people come to train first aid, because the whole purpose of training is so that you can practice or do your first aid in a standard that is safe, prompt, and effective.
Okay.
So anyone, and my greatest worry is we have seen very few, if not close to none, domestic workers. Right? I wonder why people don't bring them for classes, because in my opinion, I think those are the people who should do the training, because anything can happen to your children while you are at work. Those are the people who spend much time with your children. So whether it's drowning, it's choking, it's whatever, they must be able to deal or agree with that situation. Because the reason is, with first aid, there are a lot of things that are not done properly. People think they're doing first aid, but a lot of things are not done the correct way.
Yes.
So I think there's need for people to learn first aid. It's an interesting course, as well as some people may take it for granted, but once you get into class, you'll see that first aid is really a good topic to learn.
So what do you feel are misconceptions people have about first aid? Because you say that you feel like more people should know it than do.
If not everyone.
Yeah, so do you feel there's a reason maybe that people aren't approaching St. John's to come and learn about first aid?
Right, I think basically a lot of awareness needs to be done in terms of first aid, as well as in other countries you find that they have laws that will prohibit someone from practicing, especially in public places like schools or even shops, anywhere public, without having a first aid certificate. So I think already due to that, it will make people to be aware of first aid, as well as maybe give them a hint as to the importance of first aid.
Okay, and how do you suggest we make people aware of the importance of first aid?
Right, I think through maybe social media or newspapers, but of course now with our companies that be challenging. It's a non-profit making organization, so if we do much adverts, it will be like we are now competing, we understand. Right, but I think a lot needs to be done, as well as people, once they are aware that anything can happen at any time, and some condition can be life-threatening, like for example heart attack. And with heart attack or cardiovascular diseases, you realize that the earlier you recognize if someone has a cardiovascular disease, the better, as well as it will greatly increase their chances of survival.
Okay. So, in Africa, there are certain things we have maybe that are more common for us than in some of these countries that maybe where the first aid manual comes from. Like maybe things like snake bites and things like that. So do you find there's a difference maybe with how we approach first aid versus how they approach first aid in the manuals that come from somewhere else?
No, I think especially for our company, that's why, especially with the advanced first aid, that's why the certificate is called Lifesaver International First Aid Course. It's internationally recognized. So you realize that the topics covered, they include all continents, meaning someone must be flexible. Even if you're taken to India, you can be able to engage. So it's not only based on African. Any geographical location you must be able. For example, heat stroke is not much common here like in Africa. We already use it. But you find that we teach, for example, let's say someone from Russia, if they're visitors, they can suffer from it. So they have to be aware.
Okay, and in our setting here, what do you find common? As first aiders, what do you keep seeing over and over again?
What we keep seeing?
Yeah, what conditions are common for you here in our setup?
In Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
Right, I'll say diabetes.
Okay.
Hypertension, high blood pressure. Right, as well as asthma, snake bites, they're not that very much common, as well as fainting. And choking, of course. And we can't sleep while choking. Those are the most common conditions.
Okay, so guys, now we're going to switch over and have a demonstration of some of the common things maybe that we can learn and that we can implement in our homes.
Right, okay, in this scenario we happen to be having a casualty with major epilepsy or epileptic seizures. Right, I've done a primary survey, opened the airway and checked for breathing. The breathing is present. Right, of course, in the event that the casualty will be biting his tongue, you must not try to put anything in between the teeth there. Right, then I'll also make sure that I loosen any tight or constricting clothing on the neck, chest, and the waist that may interfere with breathing. Right, depending on the surface or the ground, right, I might have to place a padding or any other materials to protect the head from being injured. Right. So you stay with the casualty, right? The one thing you can try to be opening the airway, but it can also be affected by the seizures because the person will be moving uncontrollable, right? After the epileptic seizure, the casualty is more likely to fall into a deep sleep. Of course, not always, but more likely, right? If they so happen to fall into a deep sleep, right, you treat it for loss of consciousness, whereby you have to place the casualty into the recovery position, right? So now I'm placing him into the recovery position, right? Right, I make sure that the airway is still open, then I might recheck breathing for 10 seconds, right? His breathing is still present, and maybe possibly just to confirm or check the vital signs. I'll also check the carotid pulse, right, for 10 seconds. Pulse is also present, right? Then, if possible, I can easily treat him for shock so that body temperature is maintained. Right, okay, now I've come across a casualty who has fainted, right? Of course, fainting, also known as a syncope, right? It's a brief or partial loss of consciousness due to insufficient blood in the brain. Right, now I've done the primary survey, right? And the casualty, of course, is breathing. Right, therefore, since he is breathing, I'll loosen any tight or constricting clothing on the neck, chest, and the waist that may interfere with breathing. Right, then I might as well have to treat any injuries sustained during the fall if the casualty happens to be having any. Right, so since the casualty is unconscious but breathing, I will also treat for loss of consciousness, whereby I have to place him into the recovery position. Right, I maintain an open airway, right, breathing must be okay, and the pulse, right, then I'll treat for shock, right, cover with a blanket for shock, right? But sometimes you may find that the casualty will not be unconscious. They may feel faint, what we call an impending faint. Right, the first aid for an impending faint, meaning when someone's saying I'm feeling dizzy, I'm going to faint, right, you elevate the legs. So you can use any material available, a chair or a rope blanket or any other materials to elevate the legs about 10 centimeters or more from the ground. In this way, you'll be trying to drain the blood from the lower part of the body to the brain. Right, in this scenario, I found that the casualty is being choked. As you can see, he's showing signs of choking. Right, first thing I'll try to encourage him. I can try to cough out the object. Right, of course, the object cannot be removed through choking. I mean, through coughing. So now I'll have to place one of my legs in between his legs so that I have a firm and steady balance. Right, then I'll give 5 back blows. Right, can you keep your head lower than chest level so that it becomes easier for the obstruction to be removed? So I'll be giving back blows sharply between the scapula, that is the shoulder blade. Right, I'll be pushing inward and upward. Right, of course you use force that you will be severe enough to force the object to be removed. Right, so this is how we do. Right, I'll give up to about 5 back blows. Right, after the 5 back blows, if the obstruction has not been cleared, I'll have to give the abdominal thrust. Right, I'll make a fist with the thumb inside. Right, then in the abdomen, that's where I'll still keeping the head lower than the lower than the chest level, so that it becomes easier for the object to be removed. Now we're pushing sharply inward and upward, until the object has been removed. Now then, in the event that the casualty is larger than you, or they have a big belly that you can't go around their abdomen, then or they are pregnant, you then have to give chest thrust, whereby you make a fist with the thumb inside. Right, there we are. Right, keep your head lower than the chest level, right, or pushing inward and upward, until the obstruction has been cleared. This scenario, we assume you have a choking infant or baby, right? Of course, that is someone who's under a year, 0 to 12 months, right? The first thing I'll check inside the mouth, whether there are any, if the object is not far. If it is near, using my little finger, I'll scoop it out. But if it is further, I must not attempt to remove it, because I'll push it further, then it may completely block the airway. Right, then, since I could not remove it through a finger sweep, then I have to place the baby facing downwards, right? Of course, the baby sometimes can be heavy on your arm, so I can use my femur to support, right? I'll keep the head lower than the chest level, right? Then, sharply between the shoulder blade, I'll give 5 back blows. Of course, you use minimum force since it's an infant, but still, those blows must be effective to force the object to be removed. Right, so I'll give the 5 back blows. Right, after the 5 back blows, if the obstruction has not been removed, then I place the baby facing upwards. Right, then I'll just below the last ribs there. That's where I'll give the chest thrust. Right, trying to force the object to be removed there. You give 5 chest thrusts. After the 5 chest thrusts, if the object has not been removed, you'll be alternating 5 back blows, 5 chest thrusts, 5 back blows, 5 chest thrusts. Of course, it's a life-threatening condition if it's an infant who has choked, so you must have activated ESM long back, meaning you should have called an ambulance. You must call an ambulance immediately, because it's life-threatening.
Okay guys, that was the demonstration of a few things. Let's have a recap of what we just saw.
Okay, on the demonstrations, the first one that we had epileptic seizures. Right, let me talk briefly about epilepsy. Right, epilepsy can be divided into 2 types. Right, the first one is also known as petit mal. Right, these are minor brain disturbances that usually may resemble daydreaming. For example, for the signs and symptoms, this is whereby you can see staring eyes, or there can be slight or jerky movements of the lips, eyelids, or the head. Right, then, as well as there may be strange automatic movements such as lip smacking, chewing, or fiddling with clothing, or making odd noises. Right, of course, with that one, what would be important is you must ensure safety, remove any sources of danger from the vicinity, such as water around, or anything, and must not restrain the casualty, because sometimes they may start walking. So you must not restrain the casualty unless he or she is in immediate danger. Then they're going down the steps, okay, that's when you can restrain them. Right, but however, let's focus more on the demo. That was major epilepsy, also known as the grand mal. Right, these are major electrical brain disturbances that usually result in violent seizures or fits or convulsions. Right, for the signs and symptoms, usually, but not always, an epileptic seizure follows a pattern. This is whereby you have 2 phases. Right, the first phase is what we call the tonic phase. Right, in the tonic phase, what happens is the casualty is likely to fall unconscious, usually letting out a cry. That's the only thing that happens in the tonic phase. And then in the chronic phase, this is whereby the convulsive movements or the seizures or fits may begin. right? For example, you may see that the tongue can be bitten and saliva may possibly appear in the mouth, blood-stained, and noisy breathing. Of course, for a few seconds or moments, breathing may stop for a while, but later on it will become normal, and there's likely to be incontinence, that is inability to have control over the bowels and or the bladder. Right, so, and after the seizures or when the seizures have ceased, the individuals may feel exhausted and fall into a deep sleep. So if they fall into a deep sleep, like you notice there, you'll have to place them in the recovery position.
Okay.
And with major epilepsy, right, I think most epileptic patients or people who are looking after epileptic patients or casualties, they are unaware of aura, A-U-R-A. Right? This is a warning sign prior to a seizure. Right? The person who may feel a strange taste or smell, that's the warning sign, that's the aura. So it will help them such that a lot of people have been injured or even died due to the onset of the seizure and them being injured. Because sometimes epileptic seizure triggered, for example, large amounts of water, huge fires. So a lot of people have drowned or got burnt. But in the sense that if they were aware of the aura, maybe some damage could have been controlled. Mm-hmm. As well as some people, they dwell much on African or traditional beliefs and not seek medical attention. Because yes, it cannot be controlled, but with medication it can be, so it cannot be cured, but with medication it can be cured, it can be controlled. Mm-hmm. Rather. So if someone is taking medication, the control, what it does, it will help to reduce the frequency of the seizures, meaning how often the person has seizures. Some people, as long as they are taking their medication well, they don't have any seizures at all.
Okay, fine. Can we recap the fainting? I think after we looked at the seizure, we looked at fainting.
Right. Okay. With fainting, right, like I had said, it is a brief or partial loss of consciousness due to insufficient oxygenated blood to the brain. But however, sometimes a faint may be due to other causes such as hunger, exhaustion, sometimes in women early stages of pregnancy, long periods of standing or seated, especially without any physical activity. So what will happen is the blood will pull to the lower part of the body, therefore insufficient amounts reaching the head. Or the sight of blood, meaning some individuals, if they look at blood, they may faint. Mm-hmm. Right, so those are some of the causes of fainting. Right, so for the first aid, as you noticed, right, there's first aid for an impending faint, meaning when someone is about to faint or they feel faint. Right, you elevate their legs 30 centimeters or more from the ground so that you're trying to drain or pull the blood to the brain from the lower part of the body. But however, when someone has fainted and them being unconscious, you will treat for loss of consciousness as long as they're not breathing, whereby you place them into the recovery position, and not forgetting that there's need for you to do a secondary survey and treat any possible injuries that will have been sustained during the fall. And then water, please do not pour water. I've seen some people, they do pour water on someone who has fainted. You mustn't pour water onto that person. Because already with fainting, the skin will be already cold. The sweating will pale cold, clammy skin, meaning the skin will be damp. So there's no need for you to pour water. That can aggravate shock, of which shock is more life-threatening.
Okay. And we looked at choking.
Right. Okay. With choking, right, you realize that it largely depends on the size of the object as well as the edge of the casualty. For example, with young children, they may choke on anything ranging from balloons, tubes, pacifiers, or anything. But with adults, the most common type of choking is food. Either the food will be, the person will not have what chewed it and hardly swallow it. Or sometimes maybe it can be due to trying to take juices while he's chewing something or while he's talking. So for prevention of choking, people must take their time to chew, most importantly in swallowing. Therefore, children they must be monitored when they play, or they choke on anything. And another problem with children, sometimes this is not referred to choking, because choking is when there is a foreign object stuck at the back of the throat that may partially or completely block the air passage, largely depending on the object and the edge of the casualty. Right. Of course, they may put things inside their nose. Of course, that is not choking, but it's a cause of concern. It can also interfere with their breathing. So, children, they must be closely monitored.
Okay. And do you have any other tips for us concerning any other disorders that you feel you see a lot and people mismanage?
Right. I would say mismanage, because sometimes I'll be like, I won't be there all the time as people carry out the first aid. Right. But however, let's say with let's just look at drowning. When someone is drowned, of course, we're not referring to literally drowning, because drowning is when someone has died due to suffocation in water. Right. So what you have to do, firstly, some people tend to think that they're good swimmers, so they can easily go and rescue someone, of which that is very, very dangerous. Because if not careful, you can also end up choking too. So you need to have been trained in terms of assisting someone a good swimmer. Because it can be risky. Right, so you can use any other methods, like you can throw something onto that casualty. Of course, this is basically talking about a near drowning incident. Right, you can throw something to the casualty, or you can row, meaning you can use maybe a boat to go to the casualty, or you can go inside to get your casualty, or you can tow the casualty, use any material to go and tow them out of the water. Right, once the casualty has been rescued, for your first aid, make sure you lay them on a dry flat surface. Right, then you, depending whether the casualty will be breathing or not, if they are not breathing, then obviously resuscitation will be necessary. Then, before you can commence your CPR, that's cardiopulmonary resuscitation, you give 5 initial rescue breaths. Right, the same with when rescuing in water. The other challenge is you are encouraged to be giving rescue breaths until out of the water. So this is why I say these are some of the reasons why you ought to have special training to do that. It can be very difficult. Right, so once you have rescued them, give 5 initial rescue breaths prior to commencing CPR. Right, then as you do your resuscitation, each time you'll be giving chest compressions, there may be need for you to turn the head to the side, such that there is a possibility that during chest compressions, the water may come out. So if it does come out and the person facing upwards, right, they will so vomit. The vomiters will go back and choke them, so it will be a risk. So each time giving compressions, turn the head to the side.
Okay.
And as well as you may have to treat for hypothermia if necessary. Right? Hypothermia is when the body is exposed to very low temperatures. So you might have to remove any wet clothes if necessary, because you realize that hypothermia can also be a great danger to be casualty, because you realize in countries where it is very cold, like where there's snow, people are more susceptible to hypothermia rather than the drowning itself. Remember, water has a cooling effect 10 times faster than wind or air. So you remove any wet clothes, and of course, make attention before you commence your first aid.
Okay. What about falls? Do you see a lot of falls? Maybe people
Falls, yes. A lot of people do fall, right? So it will depend where they're falling from, as well as the height. So if someone has fallen from a height, let's say about a meter or more, as a first aider, you must take precautions to suspect spinal injuries and treat the casualty as such, and prevent any further movement against bricks or other materials against the body, so that you maintain the position found. Because I think, as you are aware, with spinal injuries, any slight movement may cause further damage to the spine.
Okay.
As well as other injuries. Let's say someone falls when going down the step. Sometimes they may have soft tissue injuries, right? That is sprains or strains, injuries to ligaments or tendons, right? So you have to do what we call the RICE method, first aid, the abbreviation. Right, you let the casualty rest when you stop them from doing another physical activity. Right, then you immobilize, meaning you put up means. If you have to use splints to prevent the person from using the injured part. Right, then you cold compress, you apply ice, and with ice, you must never apply the ice directly to the skin. It will bend the skin. So you can either put it in a plastic bag or wrap it in some form of clothing. Then you compress for up to about 15 minutes. Then, of course, 10 to 15 minutes off. Do not apply the ice continuously. It will burn the skin. That's why it will cause numbness rather. Then you also elevate the injured part. That's the RICE method.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about poisoning and animal bites? Do you see a lot of those? Maybe dog bites in the home.
Right. Yes. For dog bites. Snake bites, yeah, in terms of bites, those are a bit common, but I wouldn't say they're much common, because there are few instances of such. But with dog bites, we've had severe dog bites of lately, like through the newspapers. Remember, there was a West Somerton lady who was severely bitten by dogs, right? So, yeah, people must need to know what to do, right? Of course, the danger or the challenge with dog bite is, remember, as a first aider or as you try to assist someone, you must ensure your safety first. So now, I don't know how the best way to handle the dogs.
Okay.
You see, right? But if possible, once the dogs will not endanger you, right, then you have to call an ambulance, because the person will need medical attention. Right, then you apply the principles of controlling bleeding, that is placing the casualty at rest, and applying direct pressure. Then you can treat any injuries, bandage them. If you have the bandages, you dress and bandage, right, so that you can just.
Okay. Okay, I'm sure you see a lot of burns as well, maybe in the workplace or at home.
Yes, yeah, a lot. But in terms of burns, they'll be classified according to the mechanism of injury, meaning what causes them. For example, with chemical burns, right? Let me talk about chemical burns briefly. Right, you find that they are from corrosive materials, such as, right, for domestic ones, such as oven cleaners, drainage cleaners, paint stripper, rust remover, or even cheek and domestos. Right, so in terms of first aid, you have to flush the area with plenty of water and seek medical attention. right? And if the container is there, you have to check the container with the casualty to hospital.
Okay.
Or if it's a large container, like in industries.
Why is that? Why should we take the container to the hospital?
So that they know the type of chemical, as well as its dangers, whether it's a hazardous, poisonous, corrosive chemical, and so forth.
Okay.
And so that proper first aid can be done immediately. That is important.
Okay.
Right, then in terms of chemicals, in the industries, when the container is large, you can take it with you in the ambulance or with the casualty. Right, there's always numbers. There are certain numbers, 1208 or what, not those numbers. Once you mention those numbers, they definitely know what type of chemical it is, and the first aid to be administered. As well as for international standards, besides calling an ambulance as a first aid, you also have to call poisons or chemicals as well. Right, then in the event that the chemical will be in powder form, there will be need for you to flush the casualty's clothes while it's removing them. We remove them while it's flushing the blood because it can penetrate. Right, then of course you wear adequate protective equipment or clothing as you do that. Right, and for electrical burns, I just want to talk about the common ones. Right, electrical burns, first thing is safety. Make sure there's no further danger from the electricity. Make sure the main switches have been switched off, or in the event that you don't know where the main switches are, or it's tend to be impossible, maybe it's locked where there are main switches. Right, so in that case, you have to try to insulate the cable. To find any insulator, need something wooden or made of plastic to separate the cable from the electricity. And wearing shoes, as well as stand on top of another insulator, be it books or any other material. Right, then for thermal or dry or heat burns, right, for the first aid, you cool the area. Right, either you flush with plenty cool water or you can immerse the part into cool water. Then you come with a fluff-free dressing. Do not use, for burns, never use fluffy materials such as cotton that will stick to the burn. And do not break any blisters, because a blister is an inflamed top layer of the skin. So if you break it, you have opened a bleeding ground for bacteria, as well as it can be painful having done so to the casualty.
Okay. All right. So to wrap up, can you just tell us your favorite first aid story so far?
Right. My favorite first aid story was at Petra. We cover a lot of duties, events, and in the past years we were even covering Zimbabwe Premier Soccer League. That was one of the guys going there. But however, the best ever I will always recall was in Petra Junior. There was a epileptic seizure scene, and it was so, the seizures are so traumatic and frightening. So everyone was on hold, including the referee. They didn't know what to do. Then so happens I was the medic, and I was the only medic covering that match or that crowd in particular. So people were shocked, at what to do. And as I went there, thank God I believed in myself. I was so confident, and I really handled the situation well. The praises and the comments I got from people were so overwhelming. I will always recall that moment, because people, they thought maybe the person had died. So happened when the person was about to score in the 18th yard, they started having seizures. It was so touching and frightening. So I handled the situation well, and within minutes the person was well. Then the ambulance said, no, as long as he knows he's epileptic, and the epilepsy does not last more than 5 minutes, or is unconscious for not more than 10 minutes, then there's no need for an ambulance. Of course, you can just encourage him or advise him to go to seek medical attention after.
Okay, good job.
Yeah,
so can you tell everyone out there who wants to do a first aid course here in Ndlovu how they can do that here at St. John's?
Right, okay, you can come to St. John's to get your first aid, even in any country. If you log on to www.stjohn.org, they will give you the addresses or the places in your country where St. John is located. But for here, we're located at number 2 Berwick Drive, corner Hillside Road and Berwick Drive in Famona, right just behind the Fire Brigade, Bulawayo Fire Brigade headquarters in Famona.
Okay.
Right, and our telephone numbers is 881875. Of course, you prefix the area code for Bulawayo.
This has been another episode of Health and Living with me, Nomaqhawe and Ndlovu. I hope you've learned something today that you can implement into your lives. Please join us next time.